This underlines the sheer scale, the sheer horror of what Israel has done to the people of Gaza and why this is one of the gravest crimes of our age. The Ministry of Health in Gaza this weekend published a 649-page document with the name, age, gender and ID number of every Palestinian killed between the 7th of October and the 31st of August this year that it has information for. That represents over 34,000 of the over 40,000 Palestinians officially listed as dead. Now, as I've emphasised throughout, this is actually a serious undercount. Thousands classed as missing are not included in these statistics. For example, buried under rubble but never discovered. Gaza has been destroyed, its healthcare system violently dismantled, its hospitals ruined, the system for reporting deaths is clearly not functioning in any meaningful, proper sense. It also relies, this system, such as it is, on deaths being reported in the first place in utterly impossible conditions, including when entire families are being wiped out. It doesn't include those who aren't suffering violent deaths, technically. Think of those with serious health conditions like cancer or heart disease who aren't getting proper treatment. We could go on. Another very important point, the ID numbers referred to here are Israeli assigned IDs. Israel still has control of the civil registry in Gaza. That means the existence of these people who've now been violently slaughtered, has been confirmed by the Israeli state itself. So this is an incomplete list, but on this incomplete list, on the first 14 pages, the age of each of those killed is listed as 0. That is under 1 year old. 14 pages of babies killed by Israeli weapons since last October. I don't want to cause unnecessary distress, but we have to be clear about the gravity and the depravity of the crimes here. Some of these babies will have been burned alive by Israeli rockets. Some of these babies will have been buried alive. Some killed instantly, some slowly suffocated to death as the buildings in which they were in fell apart as they were hit by missiles and the structure collapsed. Some of these babies will have been shot. Some will have bled to death. Some of these babies were born in the midst of this genocide, surrounded by unimaginable horror, and all they knew was suffering before their short and miserable lives were terminated. The horror of what Israel has done, the sheer scale of the crime, a crime facilitated by our governments, a crime of historic proportion, should never, ever, ever stop taking our breath away. It is not possible, in my view, for a mortal human being to grasp the sheer enormity of this crime. Now, this is a point that needs to be made as we approach the first anniversary of this genocide beginning. Israel's propagandists, indeed Israel's leaders, justified the genocidal onslaught against Gaza by falsely claiming that Israeli babies were beheaded on the 7th of October by Hamas militants. These claims were widely shared by media outlets which did not do due diligence and check the veracity of the extreme claims that were being fed before they published them to audiences of millions of people. On the 10th of October last year, the front page of the Metro newspaper in Britain, which by the way has the highest circulation of any newspaper in the country, was 40 babies murdered by Hamas, with the subheading, "Children beheaded as families slaughtered, says Israel." In the second paragraph, it says, "Some of the children were found beheaded by their cots." The front page of the Times newspaper on the 11th of October was, "Hamas cut the throats of babies in massacre." The front page of the Daily Express, again on the 11th of October, was, "Horror at pure evil, beheading of babies." The front page of the Sun newspaper, again on the 11th of October, carried the subheading, "Savages beheaded babies in massacre." Clearly, it wasn't just our media. On October the 10th, President Joe Biden, using the bully pulpit of the US presidency, he's the most powerful man on earth, with the biggest and most influential single platform on our planet, in a televised broadcast of the whole world, televised conference broadcast of the whole world, he said,
"I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children."
These claims were all false. No baby was beheaded on the 7th of October. There were no such pictures in existence because what was claimed to have happened did not happen. Joe Biden was lying. And indeed, Biden has no excuse here. According to the Washington Post, in November last year, he dismissed, and I quote, the recommendation of some staffers that he cut a line about Hamas beheading babies because those reports were unverified. According to Israel's own official statistics, one baby, that is an infant below the age of 1, was killed on the 7th of October. She was 10-month-old Mila Cohen, shot dead through the door of a safe room by Hamas militants. Now, to be clear, that is a crime. That is a crime in its own right. And I've always been clear from the very beginning that Hamas and other militants committed grave war crimes on the 7th of October for which there's no defence. No cause on earth ever justifies the killing of civilians. The point is, Israel's leaders and propagandists spread the claim about babies being beheaded because it is difficult to think of an act which is more depraved than that. The purpose was to make people think that the population of Gaza were frankly animals beyond moral redemption, and therefore you should feel no sympathy for them when Israel turned its bombs and bullets on them. Let me just offer some proof of this. On the 9th of October, the Israeli Army Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, COGAT, that is the general who has military responsibility for the West Bank and Gaza, Major General Ghassan Ali, declared, Hamas became ISIS and the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of being horrified. Human animals are dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade of Gaza, no electricity, no water, just damage. You wanted hell, you will get hell. I should note that virtually no media outlet in the West reported these comments. That was despite the fact there was no ambiguity in them. One of the most senior Israeli generals made it clear that he believed the civilian population of Gaza had collective guilt and therefore they were going to suffer collective punishment. Clear genocidal intent. There was no question that his statement can be only interpreted as paving the way for war crimes and justified on the grounds that he says the civilian population basically backed what had become ISIS. He was talking about the utterly depraved violence, which was obviously being splashed on newspapers, front pages, and so on, that made them human animals, and therefore they would be dealt with accordingly. That is the war crime of cutting off the essentials of life and getting what he described as hell. Now, it was very clear from the very beginning that the Israeli state was going to kill far more people than those killed, again, in war crimes by Hamas and other Palestinian militants on the 7th of October, which indeed happened within 3 or 4 days. So they had to portray their much deadlier violence as morally superior to that of Hamas. That is, they may be burning countless babies alive in their cots with their missiles, but at least they didn't behead them. That was the basis of what they did with those claims. Now, in total, according to Israel's own official statistics, 36 Israeli children, that is, Israeli civilians aged under the age of 18, are known to have been killed on 7 October. 2 of them, 2 adolescent children, are known to have been killed by the Israeli army shelling the home of Pessi Cohen in Kibbutz Be'eri. According to Israel's official data, 10 children were killed by rockets fired by Hamas and other militants. Again, these are crimes. They remain crimes regardless of there being no deliberate targeting of those children. Firing rockets indiscriminately in a civilian area is a war crime. But again, Israel's not in a position to claim moral superiority there, is it? Given it's killed thousands and thousands of children with missiles. It claims it hasn't deliberately targeted children. We will come on to that. But even if it says it hasn't deliberately targeted children, that doesn't absolve it of war crimes. You see, you can see here how Israel's condemned by its own pronouncement. It rightly judges the killing of those Israeli children on the 7th of October to be grave war crimes. How could the thousands of Palestinian children being killed with Israeli weapons be any different from that then, except the crime is on a much, 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 much bigger scale and therefore so much graver? For Israel to say it has not committed crimes in Gaza would mean it have to say, for example, that the killing of Israeli children with rockets wasn't a war crime on the 7th of October. Indeed, Israel's claims that it doesn't deliberately kill children is a nonsense because, as the Israeli-Palestinian publication, for example, Plus 972 magazine has revealed, which is about how the Israeli targeting system works when identified targets, which is that it has repeatedly, the Israeli army, known children are there in advance and that they will therefore be killed when the Israeli army attacks. The Israeli army has taken a decision over and over again that those children are acceptable collateral damage. The report revealed one system was called, and this is hideous, Where's Daddy? And I quote, which was used specifically to track the targeted individuals and carry out bombings when they had entered their family's residence. It goes on, the result, as the sources testified, is that thousands of Palestinians, most of them women and children or people who were not involved in the fighting, were wiped out by Israeli airstrikes, especially in the first few weeks of the war because of the AI program's decisions. It further says, let's say you calculate that there is one Hamas operative plus 10 civilians in the house. A said, usually these 10 will be women and children, so absurdly it turns out that most of the people you killed were women and children, A being one of the sources. We also know on 7th October of other children killed after being shot dead in their cars with their parents. Now, Israel would rightly say that was a grave crime. So what would they say about the fate, for example, of Hind Rajab and 4 other Palestinian children, as well as their aunt and uncle, who were massacred in their car earlier this year? And if you read the detailed investigation into that, it is impossible not to conclude that was anything other than deliberate. And that's just one example. Here's the key point. Israel has perpetrated one of the worst massacres of children of our time. The mass slaughter of all civilians in Gaza, of course, is a crime, but the sheer scale of the killing of children is just beyond shocking. And that includes the mass slaughter of babies. This is, after all, a genocide. And yet there was more outrage and disgust over the beheading of Israeli babies, which never happened, than of the mass slaughter of thousands of Palestinian babies, toddlers, small children, teenagers, which is ongoing every single day. And here we can see in brutal black and white how Palestinian life is treated as having no value, no meaning whatsoever. Well, those media outlets, as well as Joe Biden, should be held to account because they helped facilitate genocide. Those claims were used to pave the way for a genocidal onslaught which did result in the mass slaughter of babies, as well as so many other children and so many other civilians. And we have to hold to account not just the politicians, but the media outlets who paved the way for one of the worst crimes of our age. Please press like and subscribe. Do leave your comments, your thoughts. Do help keep the show on the radio at patreon.com/4. Listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.